We'll go ahead and get started tonight. Thank you so much for being here. If you can believe it, we're almost through with the quarter. So talk about the year already going fast. This is my last night teaching, unless something crazy happens. So I really appreciate y'all allowing me, giving me the opportunity to do this. This is my first time teaching an adult class in the auditorium. So it's the teacher, I think, always gets more out of the class than maybe sometimes the students do, just by your own having to prepare for it. So I appreciate the opportunity. If there's anything that y'all think that I could have done better, I would really like the feedback. So maybe not Tim Payne, but everybody else. I would solicit your feedback. So his would just say new teacher. But no, thank you so much. Tonight we're going to be talking about bullying and profanity. So I'm going to have these kind of set up as two separate topics. So we're going to try to do one and then move straight into another. We kind of had more topics than we had time for this. So first and foremost, kind of set the same template as we've been going. Some conceptual verses for bullying. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good, from Romans 12. If it is possible, as much as depends on you, live peaceably with all men, from Romans 12. And then, and just as you want men to do, you do also to them likewise. Or you do to them likewise. Bullying is kind of one of those ambiguous terms a little bit. In our modern culture, it can kind of mean different things. So how would you define bullying? And along with that, is it an issue that perhaps is worthy for us as a congregation tonight to talk about? And you can say no, just please. What do we think? Definition, and then also, is it a worthy cause? Yes, ma'am.
So you have physical bullying, you have emotional bullying, you have intellectual, or if someone is different in some way, you have that kind of bullying. I think it's definitely appropriate because it happens in person, it happens online, it happens blatant, it happens subtle. So I think I was bullied a lot as a kid. When you're not prepared for that, that can go many different ways, right? And a lot of times kids can turn inward, and that's not a good thing, or they can turn outward. Not that it's not justified, but how we handle it can look very different for very different children.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, I appreciate it. Yes, sir.
I would say any way to make someone feel less valuable than they are. That can come in any shape or form.
Worth talking about?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Just want to make sure. Yes, sir.
In the same vein as that, I would say bullying is like when someone bullies someone else, they're trying to make themselves superior, more dominant in any given situation through fear, intimidation, cruelty. This could be just because they're a rotten person or because they've been crushed by the world once or twice before, and now they seek to ensure that everyone else knows that suffering as well by inflicting it themselves.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Well, I don't disagree with anything that's been said, and I do think it's a topic worth talking about, and I do think it's a problem in our society. I also say that it's a term and a concept that a lot of people have twisted on its head. You know, if you go and tell somebody homosexuality is a sin, they're going to go back, well, you're bullying.
Right.
And you're making me feel inferior because you're saying that what I'm doing is a sin. So there is obviously never an excuse for demeaning people. And I think, unfortunately, there are people who wear the name of Christian who have used that kind of mentality to treat people badly. There's nothing in the Bible that teaches it's okay to make people or to abuse people verbally or otherwise.
Right.
I just feel like we have to be careful when we're talking to our children and when we're trying to define to them this, that when somebody just says, well, you're being a bully because you're telling me it's wrong,
Yeah.
that may not necessarily qualify for what we're talking about.
Right, and I'm happy you made that distinction. That's those are thoughts that I wanted to make sure and bring out, so I appreciate that. I don't know of the term bullying in the Bible. I could be wrong, but I don't think so. Could y'all think of any instances of bullying in the Bible? Or is it motivations behind the action? What do y'all think? JD, yes, sir.
What springs to my mind immediately is literally every interaction the Pharisees ever had with Jesus or his disciples.
Okay.
Honestly.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Joseph and his brothers.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, we're going. It's like y'all got a copy of my slides. Okay. All right. It's good. Yes, sir.
Well, going back to the example of Pharisees, when they said, has anybody, they came back and said, nobody ever spoke like this man. They go, well, have any of the leaders believed in him? Have any of us believed in him? That, in a sense, is a form of bullying, in the sense that
Yeah.
you shouldn't be doing something that we aren't doing. And it's to use your term, well, intellectual bullying, in the sense of you shouldn't vary from what the norm is.
Right. Yeah. Very good. Yeah. So I'm happy you brought those up. I'm going somewhere. So let me pull up kind of just so we're centering on terms. I got this off of Google, which uses the Oxford language. To seek to harm, intimidate, or coerce, usually someone perceived as vulnerable. And then these are my thoughts on the second bullet there. Repeated targeted negative attention, sometimes focused on an observable physiological abnormality. So someone is different on a physiological standpoint. Examples of this can be mental conditions, it can be age, it can be weight, race, religion, culture, usually some type of difference that we're talking about. And like I said earlier, I brought up, would you say Joseph and his brothers, Sarah and Hagar, Jesus and the Jews, like would you define that as bullying? I'm not going to say one way or the other. I'm going to take the political answer and say it's not, the Bible did not use that term, so I would caution, be very, very careful about categorizing those instances as bullying and just stick to what the Scripture says, because like was pointed out, bullying in our society now can be massaged to mean different things. So, yes, ma'am.
Two quick things. The term repeated. If we're talking in a school situation with our children, that word repeated is extremely important.
Okay.
One time I say something ugly to you, even if it is demeaning,
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily constitute bullying. In our minds as a parent, it is, but I'm just telling you what legal is. Repeated
Got
is
it.
a legal term.
I'm happy you brought that up.
There was something else and it went out, so I'll raise my hand.
All right, we're going to get to school, and I bet it's going to rekindle some stuff. Absolutely. So again, to me, it feels weird categorizing those things as bullying. I read some articles in preparation for this where people took passionate stance and was calling it bullying. I don't know. I didn't use that word. Like, let's just stick to what we can say is wrong about those stories, as opposed to kind of categorizing it as this. Now, let me ask you another point. Does the intent behind the negative act matter? And I would like someone to take both sides of this if possible. All right. Anybody, does the intent matter? Yes, sir.
I don't think it always does.
Okay.
Because sometimes, what you see is, especially in children, you see them simply imitating what they see in their parents.
Yeah.
This is not, I'm trying to my parents make fun of and say things about people who look like X, Y, Z, and therefore I'm going to engage in the same behavior. Not because they even understand why they do it, but just because it's repeating what parents do. It doesn't change the fact that it is demeaning and it is harmful and everything else. And again, you say, well, let's not use bullying for these situations in the Bible. I'm fine with that. Because we're not talking about the term we use, we're talking about the behavior that's involved. Those, all of
Right.
them we talk about are examples of this kind of behavior, pushing people to behave a certain way or speaking negatively of someone a certain way. And so whether we use that terminology or not, what we're really more concerned about is the behavior and the attitude behind it. And again, sometimes people are just repeating what or crucify him. They're just going along with the crowd.
Right, yeah, they're sucked into that. Yep.
They're just going along, and peer pressure becomes a big part of that. You see a bunch of kids standing around watching a fight at school. Most of them wouldn't engage in the fight. They don't even know why the fight is taking place. They're cheering on the bully or whoever.
Like Paul and Stephen, yeah.
But it's just the pressure of the situation. Doesn't make what they're doing right. I mean, it's the intent. so the intent really doesn't matter.
Right. Yes, ma'am.
So I totally agree with that. On the flip side, I do think sometimes as kids get older, they start to understand what intention can get for them.
Well, attention?
They understand what bullying can get for them.
Oh, I see.
For example, maybe they've done some things that they've seen at home. We emulate. That much is very true. But as you get older and you start to understand, well, when I manipulate someone, that is a form of bullying because I will get something out of that.
Get some sort of power or something.
I can see both sides, but I do think intention matters.
Yep.
Because especially as Christians, when we learn what's acceptable
Yep.
and what's not,
And
and we maintain certain behaviors, then there's an intention behind that, whatever that.
right. Yeah. And I'll give you an example, okay? The Casey's aren't here tonight, are they? All right. On a completely unrelated note, y'all can probably observe I'm losing my hair. I know it's a shocker, but there's someone routinely comes up behind me and touches my head as he walks by. Unrelated to the Casey's, might be Wade. Is that bullying? Okay, it could be, but no. So he's not. He's just messing with me because we're friends. Now, if that really deep down bothered me, then it could be, and I could go talk to him, and at that point, then it's something that we need to work out. But in and of itself, is he bullying me? No. But I don't let him know that it bothers me, so that's a whole other thing. So let's talk about this. Where can bullying occur?
Anywhere.
Oh man, I messed up my slide there. I wasn't supposed to give the answer. Anywhere. Where is it most likely to occur?
Everywhere.
School is a big one. That's the one that comes to my mind mainly because you're just around other kids. Kids around other kids. Sports. What about in the home? Sibling on sibling. Yeah? Enmity. Enmity is a word that I kept coming back to my mind. I had an interpreter overseas that he would try to describe this hatred that occurs between different tribes, and the word that he kept using was enmity. And I hadn't really heard that word a lot, and I was like, wow, you have a large vocabulary. But it's kind of inherent hatred of another person for some other characteristic. And I think that can exist in brothers and sisters and siblings, but that's not really what we're going to talk about tonight. We're mainly talking about kind of school, but then also at church. Can bullying happen at church? Okay. Can it happen in our church? Yeah. Good. Okay. All right. We've moved around. I think we've been members of about 10 different congregations over the last 15 years or something like that, just because everywhere we moved. And we get a good viewing of different places and everything. And almost in every place, there's some type of butting of heads between youth, a lot of times. And that's not, I want to say natural with the territory, but it happens quite a lot. And we have to be really, really careful as a congregation that those things don't lead to harder feelings that get in the way of our unity. Let's see if I didn't mess this one up. Good. What can we do about these problems at each of the above locations that we talked about? So school. What can you do about bullying at school? Your son or daughter comes home, they talk to you, and you're kind of getting an indication that there might be some type of bullying being involved. What steps would you take? And this is like I'm asking from a parent of school-age kids, those that have walked the walk, what works, what doesn't. What do we think? Yes, ma'am.
Military chain of command, you start with the teacher. If you don't get really any results at that level, you just slowly to the next level. And unfortunately, at the school level, you have the human factor. Speaking as a parent who had to deal with the situation, you get, oh, but you don't understand this child's family life. And if by some chance your child has the better family life, he should be okay or she should be okay because, well, they have a good life. This is one little bump in the road. Still doesn't matter if it messes with your child's mental health.
Yeah. Right. What else? What do we think? Any former teachers, former principals have any?
Well, hearing that just does make me kind of angry at whoever said that to her, because that is not okay. And it's not an appropriate response from a teacher. And if you get a response like that from a teacher, you need to move on up the ladder as quickly as you can. Bullying is a legal issue, I guess everywhere in the country, but for sure in the state of Texas, in every school district, charter school, private school, whatever kind of school, has protocols to go through. But also remember, there are two sides to stories, and I'm just throwing that out as a caveat.
Yep.
Or three, as I used to tell the children in my school. There's your side, his side, and probably the truth is in the middle, right? But they're children, right? And I'll tell them, I didn't witness it, so I'm the judge here. I'm hearing both sides independently, and then I'll call on the witnesses. But when it really is bullying, the school should be behind you. The number one thing I think we need to do is build our children up, make sure that we as parents and grandparents and members of this church have the right kind of relationship with the children, that they're not sitting in their room hiding it from their parents. That scares me more than bullying at school, in the workplace, or anywhere. For a child to take all of that in, or an adult, we get bullied too. You know, we have people who say in jest, and that was the other thing I wanted to say, in jest, sometimes we have these jokes that we say where you have to wonder sometimes, and maybe it's just Linda with her elementary bubble. Very possible, I'll admit it. Hugh tells me that all the time, so I'll admit that's my view. But we need to be careful with our jesting. And are we, rubbing your head? Okay, if it does bother you, you need to say it. I'm not going to speak up if somebody hurts my feelings.
Yeah.
I'm just not going to do it. It's not in my DNA.
Yep.
But it will sit there on me, and I don't want that to happen to our children.
Yep,
So
absolutely.
that relationship, keeping questions, I ask Logan all the time, when I have just him in the car, everybody good? How's your friends? I mean, I know I'm not his parent, but sometimes he'll tell me some things he won't tell them.
Yeah.
And so I try to make sure we have that relationship. Very important. But it should never be tolerated.
And one thing I'll get to you in just one second. This class, so Sophia and I, we were talking today about this, and we were sitting there together, and she was like, "Oh, you need to write all this stuff," and I was like, "Okay, yes," but one of the beauties of this class and how we're setting it up is I get knowledgeable people to say wisdom, and that's what that is. So I hope everyone was listening, because I was. I appreciate that. Yes, Tim.
So she was talking about building our kids up, start early, super early, give them the love and the confidence. So each bullies and victims that are affected the most usually have a vacuum of something at home, right?
Yeah.
So that we got to start super early to build their confidence up so they take it. And then sometimes we want to be helicopter parents and go take all the hurdles out of the way. I really want for our kids to just have a little bit of it as they grow up, because otherwise when we take it all out of the way, the world is mean and scary and dark, and it's going to beat them up when they get to be an adult. They're not going to know how to handle it. So they got to handle some of this as their kids. It's just, that's part of it. And you just got to teach them along the way. Okay, if this happens, you can do this or do this, and just give them some encouragement. And it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, and that's what's so hard with a lot of this, putting a lesson like this together, is a lot of those concepts are rolling around in my head, and it's, yes, you want them to be, it's like you have a temptation as a parent to totally shield them, boy in the bubble type thing, but at the same time, then they get released out there, and it's, they have no idea how to take in all the different things coming at them. So I agree with that. That's heavily in the wisdom side, as far as the kid, the parent, the situation, the faith, the strength, the knowledge, everything that goes into there with that decision making. Yeah.
The other sort of teaching your kid to defend themselves, and that fine line as a Christian, how far to defend. How, one thing to, remove yourself from the space, but then, then it gets physical from the other person. Do I just take the hit, or do I defend myself?
Right.
Those are the hard questions.
Right. Yep. Stephanie, and then we'll move on.
this is it is a difficult conversation to have as a parent, because you want the best for your kids. But Linda said something a few Wednesdays back about schools, that we can be involved in what's going on in our kids' school. You don't have to be outside of it. And if you think like, okay, it's too late, I don't really have a relationship with my kid, don't ever think it's too late. Like, you can slowly build up that relationship. If it's like, because schools are good about like having concerts, having different activities or whatever. You go attend, you go visit, you go see who the teacher is, you see the kids around, you ask them, and you try to get an idea of like who the kids that they're around, and
Yeah.
I think that's important for us as parents, that we understand the school family that
Yep.
they're in, because they are there. And I agree also that that's really disappointing that parents would have to hear a response like that.
Yeah.
Because this is a legal thing, and this is something that is
In our country, in our culture, absolutely. You have a lot more power than if you were in another country and this is just the way it is or something.
So
It-
we can take comfort that we live in a society where it's backed up legally that this is not tolerated, and
And-
will be investigated if this is like serious.
Right, yeah.
Parents, you're not closed out of schools. You can go and find out what's going on. You can.
You have to take the initiative. Yeah.
If you're not getting that, if you're getting pushback, then that's where you can consider going to a different school.
And the other thing I want to bring out that you said too is about starting. If and this is kind of a point with this class too, it's never too late to start. There are consequences for waiting, but I'm reminded of a not a parable, but maybe a thought. It says, when's the best time to plant an oak tree? It's 20 years ago, but other than that, it's today or yesterday. Get started. It's not going to just grow by itself. So plant the acorn today. What about? So just whoop, that was a laser. Hopefully I didn't try anybody. So kind of my thoughts on this. Parents, again, were ultimately responsible, and that was heavy on the initiative side on the parents, what you're saying, and I totally agree. Sometimes drastic changes is necessary. Like, you have to go to the authorities. You have to be the advocate for your child. Perspectives, too, and this kind of goes into, Tim and I were on the same page. Living the world necessitates suffering. We are all going to have people that are mean to us because we're Christians, but also just because there are sins in the world. And then also the fleeting nature of the momentary problems that is our life. I'm reminded of Romans 8:18, Paul speaking, "For I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory which shall be revealed in us." And that thing, kids have been alive for 10 years, as a child or something. So they have no bandwidth to understand this is going to pass. You have someone in your class that's mean, wait 6 months and it'll be gone. So that's another thing we have to give them perspective. Yes, sir?
I know we've been talking about authority and go to authority, but in some cases, you've got to go to that child that's doing the bullying's parents and have a talk with them.
All right.
And go right to them and have the discussion.
So we're going right there. We're going right there with, if you believe, now we're gonna bring it back to the church. All right, so you could definitely do that on the outside, but we're going to talk about that. If you believe your child was being bullied, if you want to use that word, by children in our congregation, how do you handle it? So someone's mean to my child in Bible class. How do you handle it? What do you think? Negative post on Facebook? Or what?
It's a Matthew 18 situation, right? Where the Bible gives us really clear guidance on what to do. Just go to them privately. And
Go to them who? I'm sorry, Tim. So and who go to them?
yeah, it'd probably be best if the child could go to the other child. Sometimes that may not be effective, but I think that should be attempted if they have the courage to do that, and if not, parent to parent.
Parents. Okay. All right. Anybody else? We're gonna take that thought. We're gonna hold it right here. Does anyone disagree with that? Can everybody hear? No. Okay. So we said, I'm going to read off my notes because it was right on. Kid-to-kid communication. Well, here, I'll just stop being cryptic here. So let me stop. First off, what is absolutely not allowed, and just so we're all on the same page, I'm going to use my thing for the first time, my laser, and I highlighted this, I made it red, I bolded it, I underlined it, italicized. What is not allowed, now we're talking doctrine, what is not allowed is division or grudges within inside the brotherhood because of things like this. Period. End of story. I have negative feelings versus family X because of incident Y. That needs to be resolved. Period. So, something happens. What do we do? So, first and foremost, I think Linda brought this up a second ago. So, effective communication with your child. Has a misunderstanding occurred? My kid comes to me, talks to me, and I don't want to just automatically think the worst of somebody else, especially a brother or a child in our congregation. So you think 1 Corinthians 13, love thinks no evil, it doesn't hold an account, it believes all things, long-suffering, that's love. Okay, so the first time someone's mean to one of my kids, I'm not blowing a gasket, throwing a fit, trying to figure out what's going on. Calm down, I have love for my brethren. Second, kid-to-kid communication. Think about it like this. This might be a huge opportunity that's given to your kid to grow. Handle interpersonal problems. Go to that other child. Say, hey, I don't like it when you rub my bald head. You know, whatever it might be. You know, as a self-deprecating example here. And then Matthew 18. That's where we go. Matthew 18. Just because this is your child doesn't mean I get to make up my own rules of handling problems. Sometimes based on the maturity of the child or the severity of the incident, that might not be the right move. Tim, you mentioned going parent to parent. Why do you think that would be wiser, or do you, rather than parent of afflicted child to child of doing the problem?
The parents are ultimately responsible for the child, and I think that I see your point there. Probably not wise for me as the parent of the child that's been bullied to go now exert parental pressure on the child behind.
Right.
That would be violating their responsibility, the parents of the child.
Right, and I'm happy you used it in those terms, violating their responsibility. So when looking at biblical principles here, fathers need to be involved and take the leadership position in the home. 1 Timothy 3, 4, and 5 talks about the father ruling his house. And then Matthew 18 being our only allowable solution here. But if I were to go directly to the other child, I'm the dad, I'm going to solve this problem, I'm not allowing that father to rule his house. I'm trying to rule his house as well. Now, if I see something that's happening right there and then, obviously as an adult you can stop the problem, there's something going on. But I have to allow the other man to rule his house. Any thoughts on that? Let me know. Yes, sir.
Well, I think one of the things that's coming to play here is the question of age.
Age?
What is the age of the children
Yep.
involved? I'll use one example. Nicole, a while back, some kids were visiting, and she came home and she was upset, or she got in the car and she was upset. Some of the kids were visiting and been mean in class. She thought they'd been mean in class. You know, I'm sure the kids were probably just new place, you know, and we just kind of said, look, they're visiting, let's not worry about it too much, let's move forward. We're not going to make a big case out of this.
Right.
And we're talking about kids that are, we're probably at this time 6, 7 years old.
Yeah.
So we're not dealing with, going back to your deal of intent. These are kids that are probably not intending to try to be big bullies.
Who wants to be judged based on how they were at 7?
Part of it is you
Yeah.
got kids that, like anything else, you got 3 kids that came in, there were 3 kids that were like one family, and they're probably used to being together, and so anyway. But now, getting to that last point, the parent to child, I would say in most cases, I would agree. Here's the one scenario where I might think differently.
Mm-hmm.
Let's suppose you've got a young man or a young woman that you have been their Bible class teacher. You have had an interaction with them, and maybe now they have already faith gospel. And this comes up. I think approaching them, not necessarily from the standpoint of, hey, you better not do that again to my kid.
Yeah.
But, you know, as a role of a mentor or Bible class teacher or spiritual leader in the church, the role that you've had, and with that person in particular, say, do you realize how your behavior, hey, so my kid came to me and said you were doing this. Number one, going back to the making sure we don't misunderstand something. Are you aware of how? Are you aware of how touching Ryan's head upset him?
Y'all don't tell him that, okay? All right?
You realize
Yeah.
like that he's watching your life class. So there you go. Anyway, but you know, because sometimes just because you have that relationship, number one, you may get a clarification.
Right. So situationally, yeah.
You may have a relationship. Now, if the kid's a younger kid, I would say absolutely. Because the first thing a parent's going to do is, what are you doing telling my kid that?
Right, exactly.
That's going to be the knee-jerk.
Can I ask you a question on yours? Would you then talk to the parent afterwards and said that, hey, just so you know, I talked to little Bobby, and what do you think?
I honestly think it would depend on the situation. Well, what's the
Fair enough. Yeah.
Is this a kid I've known since he was 2 years old, and we are friends?
True, yeah.
We have a almost familiar relationship versus, or is this a kid I taught once in Bible class that we kind of got to know each other, and therefore I felt comfortable saying something to him. You know, then I might go and say, hey, I had a conversation, just want to make you aware of the situation. And I think some of it, in even going parent to parent, I think some of it depends on how we approach that situation.
100%. Yep.
Do we come to the parent with the mentality of, hey, your child did X, Y, Z to my child,
Yeah.
and you need to make it right? Or do we go to that parent and say, hey, something happened, I don't really, you know, going back to the earlier conversation, and I think Hugh and Linda hit perfectly on the head. There's three versions of the truth. There's the real truth, there's my version of the truth, and there's your version.
Right.
And that's not intentional. That's just, when people see things, you know, if you ever ask somebody what happened in a car accident, if you ask 5 eyewitnesses what happened in a car accident, you know what you're going to get?
Yeah.
You're going to get 5 different versions of the story, right, of what happened. And that's because everybody has a different perspective of what's going on. And so I think a lot of that comes into play.
I totally agree with you, and I think too that it's the issue of holding grudges that we can't tolerate. Like if there is a supposed problem where it's like, you know, it just feels weird between me and brother so and so, you need to address it. That's what Jesus talks about. With you come to the altar and you remember, oh, I have, you know, that with my brother, I have a grudge. Leave your gift at the altar and go mend those problems. Like running, or if you have a problem with another family in our church, you might as well be running around with a stick of dynamite lit, just waiting for a division to occur. Like it's not good. So all right, I'll get off my soapbox on that one. That's a lot to jam in one night. So thanks for letting us. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I think to be the parent going to the other kid, it's almost like abuse of power.
Yeah.
Or, you know, because I know, like as a kid, if an adult came and said something to me, you know, kind of scare me, and you know, and I don't think we want to do that. I think it's different if you're witnessing something maybe between two kids that aren't yours, and you kind of step in, hey, you know, this isn't right or whatever. But you know, and you mentioned before, you know, when someone does something to your kid, you do get emotional about it.
Right.
Even if you try to be objective about the situation and realize, like what Linda said, there's, you know, 3 sides to the story.
Right.
You're not going to be 100% objective talking to that other kid. So I would be inclined just to go to the parents if the kids couldn't work it out. And that was.
Well, and set your mind to when, to say, okay, there will be a time when somebody's going to come to me, just like.
Oh yeah.
And already prepare that in your mind. That, hey, when so and so comes to me and says my kid is doing blah.
All right, hold that thought, because the last slide I'm going to point to you and then just pick it up where you left off. All right. So profanity. Let's get into this tonight. So conceptual verses. But now you yourselves are to put off all these: anger, wrath, malice, blasphemy, filthy language out of your mouth. In Colossians 3. Let no corrupt word proceed out of your mouth, but what is good and necessary for edification, that it may impart grace to the hearers. Ephesians 4. In regard to these, they think it strange that you do not run with them in the same flood of dissipation, speaking evil of you, 1 Peter 4, for just being different by not partaking into certain sins. As parents, what guidance do you give your children, or even as older adults here, when it comes to profanity, as far as perspective goes? Is this a conversation that y'all have with your... Sorry for the rapid shift here. Sorry, I should have had another 5 minutes buffer built in. What do we think? What kind of guidance do we give concerning profanity? Yes, sir.
I know it sounds cliche. The very first advice is don't use it. There's the old joke. Father gets mad at his kid for saying something, and he goes, "Well, where'd you learn that?" Well, Dad, I got it.
Right. Yeah. I think Stu brought up A Christmas Story a while back, right? That classic example. Yeah.
And so I think that's the absolute first thing, is make sure that's not something that utters out of your own mouth. And I think you listen for them to use it the first time, because they're going to hear somebody, they're going to repeat it.
Yeah.
And the first time it's probably exploratory. They might not even know what they're saying. And I think you should need to sit down and be honest and explain to them why it's unacceptable.
Yeah.
If you just say, don't ever say that, instead of explaining some language is not appropriate, and it's just like dress.
Yeah. Oh, great analogy. Yeah.
Talk this way. We want to speak in ways that glorify God, and talking that way doesn't do that.
And you have to teach, like you said. I have a vivid memory of when I was little. We were camping, and my grandpa and I were at a Cub Scout event, and I was digging a hole with the old army shovel, and I had been watching old war movies, and I was saying curse words. And he was horrified, so he came over and what are you doing? And I was like, what? This was in Bridge Too Far, or whatever the movie was, And he was like, no, that is just because you're saying it with an English accent doesn't mean that it's good, that it's not a good thing. So yeah, you have to teach. They don't just inherently know that these things are wrong, and then he handled it well. He would have been in his right to spank me right then, or whatever it might be, but. If I was doing it maliciously, that's another topic, or another story. So the kind of guidance that I thought about. Oh, I'm sorry. There was a hand.
Along the lines of dress, I think there's a spectrum of what people consider to be profanity. There's a handful of really bad ones that we would probably all agree, but there's some kinds of speech that I think even just within the church, different families may think.
Yeah.
Appropriate to use, and others, it's not that big of a deal. So I think it's good to at least point those out to your kids so they know.
That's true. Yeah. Euphemisms, specifically. Yeah. So this is kind of the list that I came up with. So one, you're not going to escape it just living here. And tell me if I'm way off on this. This has been my life, I guess. Everyone they work with, for the most part, uses profanity. I say everyone, 80%. Same thing with alcohol, that if your child is going to grow up and go outside of your home, they're going to hear this, period. So not talking about it doesn't accomplish anything. You better get used to it. It's just something you're going to have to get used to. You better get used to avoiding that temptation, not thinking in those terms. And this was one that I thought about too, that there's only a couple of things in this life that someone just by being in your presence can determine if you're a Christian. Your dress being one, how you're talking. But are you using profanity? If you're using profanity, they're not of God. You can immediately tell. And so thinking that, yes sir.
I would also stress for humor as well.
Yeah.
Something that I learned getting into college, and I guess for just expressing to kids as they're growing up, if you endorse and laugh at things that are profane online, even to coworkers, that makes a huge impact.
Coarse jesting, yeah.
You're like, oh, you don't speak that way, but you find this hilarious. You find these things. You show it to us. Yeah. That makes a huge impact. Yeah. So that's more speaking from experience.
Has anyone ever seen a Christian like a GIF or a meme online that had profanity in it? I have. Absolutely. Should that be acceptable? No, it's profanity. Don't like it. What are you doing? So yeah, I appreciate Sorry if I stole your thunder, but that's, yeah, we're same thought. There's no excuses to sin. Just because you're really angry doesn't mean it's okay. As adults, we are the examples. We've got to show our kids, how do adults handle extreme emotions when they come up? Oh, my anger just got the better of me. False. That means you're an immature Christian. You need to repent and you need to grow up. And then Sophia came up with this one: don't start habits are hard to break. And that means, mentally too, profanity. Not just saying it, but thinking it. Something to think about. We'll go through this one pretty quick. Why is it important to us as adults to mind our tongue in terms of profanity and euphemisms, specifically? What do we think? Is it important? Yes. Sorry. So we have a yes. We have a yes. Do we get a why? What do we think? Yes, ma'am. Sets us apart. Yeah, and so we're not hypocrites, right? I know I'm kind of pandering here. So let's go to James 1. James 1, verse 21 through 26. I'll read quick. Therefore, lay aside all filthiness and overflow of wickedness, and receive with meekness the implanted word, which is able to save your souls. But be doers of the word, and not hearers only, deceiving yourselves. For if anyone is a hearer of the word, and not a doer, he is like a man observing his natural face in a mirror. For he observes himself, goes away, and immediately forgets what kind of man he was. But he who looks into the perfect law of liberty, and continues in it, and is not a forgetful hearer, but a doer of the work, this one will be blessed in what he does. And in verse 26, what are we talking about? If anyone among you thinks he is religious and does not bridle his tongue, but deceives his own heart, this one's religion is useless. First off, there are not special considerations just because we're adults. So we have to set the example because we're being judged by it the same way our kids would be judged by it. And then also, just from a practical thought, don't expect more out of your kids than you expect out of your own self. So why would I expect them to adhere by a rule that I'm not going to follow myself? All right, and we're going to spend the remainder of the class on this question. It's not very long, but how would you react, or what actions would you take if you discovered, or if another adult told you, that your child was using profanity? Adults that have gone through this, what do we think? How would you react? What would you do? Nothing? Yes, sir.
I don't have kids, but I would certainly want to know where they learned it at, because I don't have profanity in my house.
So just practical, where to start the conversation. Where'd you hear that? Yeah, absolutely. What do we think? So this is kind of where I was going with it. One, if a brother or sister came to you, count that a blessing. That is one of the big defenses that God has given us with the local congregation, with people that care about us and want to have to put our souls ahead of theirs. It is a huge blessing. That's hard for someone to do. Some people, that's the reputation, is they find fault in everything, they can tell you about it. But most people not, okay? So when our attitude, someone brought this up, and I forget who just earlier, our attitude when someone brings an issue to us is, don't shoot the messenger. They're not calling, you're not, yeah, go. That's right, I forgot. I forgot, I'm sorry.
You just have to plan ahead, like it's going to happen, it will happen, and what are you going to do when it happens? When somebody comes to you, and is it going to be a blessing, or are you going to sit there and be, oh, not my sweet baby that's beautiful and is the best in the whole lot? No, they are not always the best and beautiful. They will do certain things. So plan for it, and if it's done right, you and that person that it occurred with, you're better off than you were before.
Yeah. Is a kid using profanity at school? You get told that, hey, little Billy, or not Billy, we have a Billy, little Bobby, he was using profanity at school. Is that a big deal or is it not? What do we think? Big deal? Little deal? Depends. Oh, okay. Why?
So you can have kids that are, by the way, this is not from experience. I'm not getting reports of David coming home and anyway. You can have people that are saying things, or you can have it directed at somebody, which goes back into that mockery or that bullying earlier.
Okay.
So that carries a lot more weight.
So validity of the claims that we're talking about? Okay.
Not necessarily that is no excuse for doing it, but I'm just
Right.
saying there's certain weightiness to the usage of how you say things.
So this is what I'll leave you with this because time's up. So one, it is a serious issue because if you've never heard them do this at home, but they do it around other people, who are they fake around? Are they fake around their friends or are they fake around you? Who is the real little Bobby? Luke 6:45, Jesus says, out of the abundance of the heart, his mouth speaks. That's a heart issue. We went all the way back to the first class talking about attitude. It's an attitude issue. Proverbs 23:7, for as he talks in his heart, so is he. And if that is a heart issue, then sometimes drastic measures need to be taken. All right, that's all I have. Thank you so much for your time tonight.